The anatomy of the choke point, environmental determinism, maritime fortification, and the biological imperative of the gate. Chapter 5, The Synthesis, Why Empires Fall. Act 2, The Anatomy. To truly comprehend why human societies repeatedly fall victim to these geographical bottlenecks, we must look past the proximate triggers of warfare and diplomacy to analyze the ultimate causes of transport economics and the foundational concept of geographic overreach. When observing the catastrophic global impact of the Strait of Hormuz closure, a logical question naturally arises in the mind of the observer. Why do nations not simply bypass these highly vulnerable maritime choke points using overland routes? Why not rely on pipelines, rail networks, or the modern equivalents of ancient caravan trails? The answer lies not in a lack of political will or human ingenuity, but in the immutable, unforgiving laws of physics. Water transportation possesses an overwhelming, inherent advantage in energy efficiency over any form of land transport due to the fundamental physical properties of buoyancy and friction. A heavy vessel displacing water requires only a mere fraction of the kinetic energy to move a ton of cargo compared to a wheeled vehicle that must constantly overcome the rolling resistance of a paved asphalt road or the friction of a steel track. This inescapable physical reality completely dictates the economic structure of global trade. When we examine the cost per ton-mile, which serves as the standard metric for evaluating freight efficiency across different mediums, maritime transport is consistently and overwhelmingly the cheapest method for moving bulk commodities over immense distances. Data compiled by the Bureau of Transportation Statistics continually reinforces this paradigm of environmental determinism. The unpriced external costs of transporting freight by truck are remarkably higher than by rail, and both overland methods are vastly more expensive than maritime shipping. While pipelines offer a highly efficient method for moving volatile liquids and gases across landmasses, they are geographically fixed, enormously expensive to construct, politically vulnerable, and critically constrained by strict physical capacity limits. In the specific case of the Persian Gulf, the available pipeline bypass capacity, such as the East-West pipeline traversing Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea or the pipeline terminating at the Emirati port of Fujairah, can accommodate only 3 to 5 million barrels of oil per day. This represents a mere fraction of the 20 million barrels that typically traverse the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. Furthermore, while some crude oil can be diverted, there is absolutely zero pipeline bypass capacity for the massive volumes of liquefied natural gas originating from Qatar. Consequently, the global industrial economy is utterly and inextricably bound to the sea, making maritime choke points the unavoidable hubs of human prosperity. Because global maritime routes are dictated exclusively by the physical shape of the continents, international shipping converges naturally upon a handful of narrow straits and constructed canals. These include the Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Strait of Hormuz. These choke points represent the most concentrated intersections of economic value on the planet. Researchers operating under the Oxford Martin Systemic Resilience Initiative estimate that nearly $200 billion worth of maritime trade is directly exposed to disruption at 24 critical junctures every single year. When blockages occur, they result in direct annual economic losses of over $10 billion, with secondary freight costs pushing the damage billions higher. As trade volumes exponentially increase to support growing global populations, the reliance on these narrow passages intensifies, massively amplifying the systemic risk of disruption from geopolitical conflict, regional piracy, or extreme weather events. This absolute, unyielding dependence on maritime choke points introduces the fatal mechanism of geographic overreach. We can define geographic overreach as the precise historical moment when the resources required by an imperial power or a global hegemon to secure a distant geographical node begin to radically exceed the economic value extracted from that node. For decades, the United States has willingly assumed the heavy burden of maintaining freedom of navigation in the Persian Gulf. It has utilized the immense technological and financial resources of the United States Fifth Fleet to protect the continuous flow of global hydrocarbons. However, maintaining a massive, forward-deployed military presence in a hostile, geographically constrained environment incurs staggering financial and opportunity costs. Estimates provided by energy security councils suggest that the implicit military subsidy required to defend the global oil supply runs into the tens of billions of dollars annually, representing a massive diversion of national wealth simply to secure a single geographic vulnerability. When the cost of security surpasses the threshold of sustainability, the hegemon faces an impossible, civilization-defining dilemma. It must either continue to bleed its treasury and its military readiness to maintain a fragile status quo, or it must withdraw and allow the global economic architecture to fracture. In the 2026 scenario, the rapid deployment of cheap, asymmetric drone technology by regional actors fundamentally altered the cost-benefit analysis of maritime security. A handful of expendable aerial drones and naval mines, costing mere thousands of dollars to produce, proved entirely capable of neutralizing multi-billion-dollar naval assets. More importantly, these cheap weapons terrified the global maritime insurance industry into total paralysis, achieving functional closure of the strait without requiring a symmetrical naval victory. The technological evolution of asymmetric warfare successfully weaponized the physical geography of the strait against the vastly superior conventional forces of the stabilizing power. This dynamic reveals a natural, environmental limit to how large and complex an empire can become before it inevitably breaks under its own exorbitant weight. A human society, much like a biological organism, can expand its influence only as far as its logistical arteries can safely and efficiently transport the caloric and energetic resources required to sustain its core. When an empire relies entirely on resources located thousands of miles away, separated by vulnerable geographic bottlenecks, it stretches its logistical lifelines to the point of extreme terminal fragility. The modern globalized economy, heavily dependent on the unimpeded flow of oil, gas, and fertilizer through the Strait of Hormuz, has expanded well beyond its natural, geographically secure limits. Complexity has bred instability, and the sheer physical distance between the point of resource extraction and the point of final consumption ensures that any disruption at the choke point will trigger a catastrophic collapse of the entire overarching system.